get a sense of where Joe Rogan was before today, before we continue on this conversation. And this is from
What Do You Mean?
What Do You Mean?
A clip popped up in my feed with Joe Rogan giving his thoughts about Christianity, and let's just say that Joe doesn't seem to be the biggest fan.
The whole thing's so stupid. Just stop and think how f***ing stupid that is.
Now, Joe said a lot of other stuff in the clip, so let's hear what he has to say and talk about it.
Because Christianity, at the end of the day, with no proof, everything is mythology. Everything. With no proof. With proof, then you examine the proof. It's super simple. And anybody that argues against that is you're just biased. You have your own ideas. If you have some proof that there was a God, that this God had one son, and he made this son come down and get the beat out of him and nailed to a board so that we could all have no sin. Can you show me some studies? Do you have a box of evidence that you can pull out and we can examine all the different pieces that points to the undeniable conclusion that that's true? Because if you don't, then it's a myth. Then you're believing mythology. Doesn't mean it's not real, but if you put all your eggs in that basket and you don't have any proof at all, well, you're entering into this weird world where you don't pay attention to shit.
I just kept on thinking of a lot of atheists today where it's like nothingness gave birth to everything.
It just reminds me of a video I saw with Cliff, and he was talking about that how we give God these different standards that he has to fulfill, but everything else in history gets a pass, right? Like, we don't ask for all these different studies of Plato. We don't ask all these different studies of Homer or multiple different figures, years ago, but we have to have this specific thing for God because it's God, and it interrupts the sin that we like to deal with in the inside.
Well, it's like that video that I put out earlier this week where Vodi Balcom is talking about, he's like, okay, well, can you prove to me scientifically that George Washington existed? Like, you can't, you're not going to find, George Washington so you can study him and put him under a microscope to study. Like, you look at the history, and you look at the history and the evidence that's found in history in order to justify the claim. So it's more, and he talks about it, it's more, you're looking more for the evidence like you would in a courtroom than scientific evidence, because you can't necessarily prove the past scientifically because it's already past. You can't study it.
Exactly.
Well,
it's convenient. That's just what it is. It's convenient to have an unrealistic standard for one thing, but for everything else, we continue using the standard that's always been there.
Well, I love the people that are like, I don't believe anything that I can't prove scientifically. Where like they're not a scientist, they're not in a lab testing gravity or testing love or any of these things that they on a day-to-day basis believe in, because it takes a certain amount of faith to just live in this earth,
Cliff said that in a video to a girl, and she says that, no, I live with only 100% truths. So he says, so when you go to the pharmacy and you get your medication, you have your chemistry lab set with you to test it, right? Just so you can make sure that they're not trying to poison you. And the girl's like, well, no, because... And he's like, all right, so you trust in something. So what is so different in trusting somebody else compared to trusting in God?
Well, I think like everything else, number one, we see God in creation, but ultimately you have to put the Bible to the test, the claims that Jesus made, put it through, through the studies that you can to see if the claims that were made were true, if they're justifiable, and based off of that, then you make a decision. Yeah. Although, stepping away from the proving piece, like at the end of the day, in order to believe in God, it's going to take faith regardless. You know what I mean? Like you can do all the smart thinking that you want or the theology that you want, and at the end of the day, it's faith that's going to be the ultimate factor here, regardless.
Well, it's interesting too, like what Chetty says, right? It's like society's going the route of being more agnostic, and I agree with him. Atheism is out of style, but now we're looking at the other side of the spectrum where it's like everybody's truth is truth, right?
Yeah,
and you can believe in what you want.
And actually, that next clip that we're going to be looking at, that is part of the reason why Joe Rogan is considering. To be honest, I think he's gone from atheist to believing that there might be something, and that is like the next step into like, yo, you're gonna believe in Christ, bro. Like it's just a matter of time. Like he's gonna talk to enough smart people that eventually he's just gonna get convinced.
Well, even before these interviews, he had like a bunch of Christians that I don't know if he didn't know that they were Christian or what, but he's been interviewing Christians.
More and more, I'm seeing more Christianity in his podcast for sure. What is Anthony saying?
Anthony's saying on the people we're talking about that then they have the audacity to say they don't believe. They have the audacity to say they don't believe in what they don't see. Right? It's just the whole trying to prove it over, but it's like it's the age-old debate. Okay, so how do you believe in air if you can't see it?
Well, it's as simple as like by faith you woke up today expecting not to die. You know what I mean? Like you went through your normal day having faith that you weren't going to die today.
You weren't literally gonna die. You were able to make it to work. This reminds me of Christians. Like we only pray when we're going to go out to travel. Right? This
is one of Andres Song's pet peeves.
No,
clearly he prays every time he leaves the house, right?
I mean, I pray in the morning. I try to. No, but I just find it funny where it's like, if we're going to go on a trip and everybody's driving to Boston, you pray about just that specific drive. But when you're going on your everyday work, right, you don't pray.
Pray all the time. Pray without season, says the word.
That's what the word says. But, what does prayer look like? It's not just the whole, like, Our Father who art in heaven, although that is a good guide to prayer. I did a sermon on that.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting. Maybe we'll do a podcast on that on prayer. Prayer is definitely confused, and I think some people make it too complicated, and other people make it too simplistic. All right, so let's check out. Oh wait, before we go on, we have an interruption. A person putting some comments in. You want to read what Rafi said?
Let's see. So she said, I do think that Christians should also be challenged to read on the history of the Bible and also scientific facts that also back up our faith.
100%.
I mean, this is something I've heard a lot with like Ruslan before. It's the fact of having church history together with the Bible only helps make it stronger, right? Like when we get to see what people believed in for so many years, it also kind of helps guide our faith a bit. And from there we also get to grow it the same way.
No, for sure. And I think that when it comes to the Christianity piece and studying history, I think that's very important because there are Christians that literally get tripped up when somebody says, well, the Bible is pretty much like playing the game of telephone because when you pass it along and you play the game at the end of the day, when you finish the whole game, it's a completely different story. It's like how the Bible was put together is nothing like the game of telephone.
No, not at all. I mean,
Number one,
it was 95 to 99%
accuracy on all of the translations. So this whole like, oh well, like people have to remember that back then, because the Bible was shared, or the different scriptures were shared audibly before we had anything to write on, like people worked on that muscle, right? Yes. Like, there's people today that actually work on their memorizing skills, and you see them being able to tell. I think like
there's a Bible Bee competition.
Well,
that did that.
Yeah. There's that, but also there's actual like people that, for example, they've memorized every single name of every person that died on 9/11.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a muscle that you strengthen. Right. That's something that you work on, and in that same way, people worked on that because they knew that they needed to transfer the stories of the Bible accurately. And this is, I mean, the evidence is in the pudding, if you will. We have all of these translations where there's 95 to 97 percent of accuracy between all of them. Like, that is crazy. You're talking about over 3,000 different scriptures that were found.